Musqueam, Musqueam, say, Clatchik nomot, Kayachtin, ti xʷməthkwəy, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, xʷməthkwəy, Ewan Hatlin Squalwin Teetsates. To all respected people, chiefs, matriarchs, respected people, I am very honored to be here to welcome you to the homelands of the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the xʷməthkwəy. Before I start, I would like to ask everyone for a moment of silence as we're coming up close to the Day of Truth and Reconciliation for Indigenous people. Let's take a moment in our hearts for the MMIW and the 215+. Hoichka. YWCA, thank you so much for taking that time. It's super important to acknowledge the history of this country, the foundation that it was built on. It was built on our backs, on our bones. A lot of our ancestors were removed from their homes. Children were removed from their homes. I have a baby right now. I have a newborn, 6-month-old. Couldn't imagine a moment without him. So let's do better. Let's think of a beautiful place where we can all live in harmony, where it's safe to love our children, love each other, be friends and allies, true allies that are going to go to war with each other, that we're going to protect our home. As a woman of this land, Squamish people, I really ask you to remember those people. It's the foundation of this country, these residential schools, the Ministry of Child and Family Services, the Indian Act. All these were developed in our territories, and we live with these policies every day, still to this day. And we need to do better. I beg and plead, let's find that way together. Let's sit at the table together and listen to each other. How can we make this better for future generations? I don't want to live in fear of my child being taken away. He's too cute. He's so amazing. And I want to thank you all for being here, taking the time out of your lives to be here, to listen to what the future leaders want to do here in this land. And I really thank you for having me here. This song is a song from Sexuality. She's a matriarch from the Squamish Nation. This song is called Greeting of the Day. And it was brought out at a time at the turn of the century when our culture was being taken away, our land was being taken away. And this song is about remembering the beauty and the strength and integrity of our people, giving thanks that we still have our connection to our land and water, still connection to our culture and who we are. And it's really taken us a lot of work to keep that together. So when I sing this song, it's a prayer song. Say a prayer for Indigenous people in Turtle Island. Say a prayer for your connection and your friendship and your connection to our lands and to our waters. Let's live in harmony. We shouldn't be living in a place where there's polluted waters and polluted lands. My great-great-grandchildren depend on it.
YWCA Shaman Sat for that beautiful song, Greeting of the Day. Greeting of the Day. Wouldn't it be nice to feel like we had the ability to dance to the songs that we hear performed from host nations? Yeah, I seen a lot of you moving in your seats, and you feel the power of this land, this place, Kamkamalai, right? We're in Kamkamalai. Yeah. All right. OCM. My name is Ginger Gosnell-Myers. I will be your moderator for tonight. It is so lovely to see the candidates. Thank you for providing your voice to this important election and to being brave, to standing up and putting your name on the ballot. It takes a lot of a bravery and commitment to do this work, so thank you. And to everyone here who has shown up tonight and online, OCM, I want to point out that we have ASL interpreters for the evening. Thank you to Jillian and to Liz. They will be capturing our conversation for those of us here and online for the evening. So over the course of tonight, I will be reminding all of our candidates to please mind your pace so that we can be, so that our interpreters can ensure that they're capturing everything that is being said. We are streaming live online right now. So hello to everyone on Zoom. Thank you for joining in from wherever you happen to be in Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territory. And for those of you online, if you would like to access closed captioning, you can go to the bottom of your screen and click the CC button. And if you need support with anything, you can message the hosts and panelists, and someone at Women Transforming Cities will be able to help you. So this is a little bit of the housekeeping for those of us online. We are here for a very important reason, and I want to call forward the ED for Women Transforming Cities, Ash Peplobal, to provide us some of the important context for why we are here and what we can expect. Ash.
Thank you, Ginger. Hi, everybody. My name is Ash, and I'm the Executive Director of Women Transforming Cities, and I appreciate the reminder about pace because I speak very fast, so that's good reminder for me. Women Transforming Cities is a grassroots organisation that has been working to build cities where everybody can belong for over 10 years. For the past 3 municipal elections here in Vancouver, we've run a campaign to amplify the voices of those who are often not heard in the civic process because of their gender, race, class, income, abilities, and other identities. We call this the Hot Pink Paper Campaign. This year, in the lead up to this election, we've spoken with almost 1,000 women and gender diverse people living here in the city, along with 25 community organisations that work with and serve equity deserving groups, to understand from them the most important issues for them this election. We took everything that we heard and we asked candidates from the major parties if they would commit to implementing 8 priority policies if they were elected. The result of that survey is available in the atrium and also on this QR code here. So this candidates forum tonight aims to build on that report card and ensure that the priority issues for equity deserving communities are centred in this election and are not just an afterthought. We've invited tonight 2 candidates for council for each of the 10 main municipal parties. This is not a perfect process tonight. The responses are going to be quick. We've got a lot of wonderful people to hear from, and there are so many topics and questions we could have included, and we've decided to really stay true to the top 10 issues that we heard in our community input process. We hope that this is one of the many opportunities that you have to delve into the policy platforms of these parties and the track record of all of the individuals and candidates in centring equity in their work. Finally, I would really like to acknowledge the enormous support we've had tonight from the YWCA Metro Vancouver City Shift, from the SFU Department for Gender, Sexuality and Women's Studies, and the amazing team at SFU Public Square who have gone above and beyond to make this happen tonight, and to all the staff and volunteers and board at WTC who've really worked to make sure that this is a forum that meaningfully centres equity. Thank you, Ginger.
Thank you, Ash. And to get started with our evening, we wanted to make sure that we spent more time hearing from the candidates than going through the process. And part of that means that we are going to be foregoing reading bios of each of our candidates, but we have provided links on the Women Transforming Cities site for each of you and for all of you who are interested in learning more about each of these individuals and their candidacy. You can find it online at the Women Transforming Cities site. What we're going to do is we're going to start welcoming all of our candidates here tonight. I am going to give the name of each person and the party that each candidate is with, and I'm going to ask you to just give a little wave as your name is mentioned. Okay, we're keeping it easy to get started. I'd like to welcome Morgane Auger from Progress Vancouver. Hello. I would like to welcome Dave Yani Singh from the Green Party of Vancouver. Hello. Stephanie Smith from the Green Party of Vancouver. Hello. Melissa DiGenova from NPA Vancouver. We have Arazu Zarabian from NPA Vancouver. Hello. Tessica Tron from Forward Together. Hello, Tessica. We also have Dulcie Anderson from Forward Together. Hello. We have Nancy Trigueros from COPE. Hello. We also have Tanya Webking from COPE. Hello. Over here, starting back over on the right, we have Rebecca Bly from ABC Vancouver. Hello. We have Sean Orr from Vote Socialist. Hello. We have Cletta Brown from Team for a Livable Vancouver. We have Grace Kwan from Team for a Livable Vancouver. Hello. We have Iona Bonomus from One City, Vancouver. And we have Matthew Norris from One City, Vancouver. And at the very front, we have Leslie Bolt from Vision Vancouver and Hanye Barzagare from Vision Vancouver. Hello, everyone. How the panel is going to work. So we have a large number of parties and candidates and only 80 minutes to get through all of the topics and questions. So we will not be able to have responses or rights of reply, unfortunately. And each party, whether you are represented by 2 or 1 candidates here tonight, all parties will have equal time to respond to questions. And you can choose who from your party will respond to which question. Also, in order to discuss more topics, 5 parties have been asked to respond to each question, not all 10, 5, in order to keep us moving through each of the topics. So who is responding has been randomized and will be displayed on the screens that you see in front of you and behind you. And for the questions your party is not asked to respond to, we encourage you to go to the Women Transforming Cities Twitter site, where each question will be tweeted, and your party has the opportunity to respond to the questions there, if you so like. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to each question. That is not a lot of time. Believe me, you started with 60. So 90, you're welcome. And to help you understand where you are in the time frame process, we have our wonderful volunteer Alexa in the front row. Alexa, yes, she is waving at you, and she's going to be holding up colored hands. So green is you're all good. Yellow, you have 30 seconds to go. And red, it's your 10 seconds, please wrap up mark. And again, I'll remind you, please go slow for our ASL reporters. For those of you who do go over your time, I will be standing up and cutting you off, just in fairness to everyone here. And so with that, we will get started. on to our first question, which will be up on the screen here. So the first question is, if you are elected, one of the first votes you'll make is how the $1.7 billion city budget is allocated. Motions are important, yes, but whose needs are prioritized in the city is clear through the budget. There are a lot of demands on the city budget, and one of the frustrations for equity-deserving groups and organizations is that every budget cycle, the first budget lines on the cutting block are social justice programs. So what we would like to hear from you is, what is one initiative that supports equity-deserving groups in the city you will be ensuring is funded in the next budget? What's one initiative that supports equity-deserving groups in the city you will be ensuring is funded in the next budget? And we will first hear from COPE, then we will go to TEAM, then ABC Vancouver, then the Green Party of Vancouver, and then Vote Socialist. So do we have our candidate from COPE who will be answering this first question? Perfect, thank you. You can just press the little red button, the little button in front of you.
Thank you very much. Being the first, I thank you for being here and giving me the honor of participating. I think, first of all, we need to assure that we're able to have the voices of people in the budget. We recently put a motion where we were requesting that the police would not have an increase, and that money would be referred to social services and to community-led organizations. And we were not heard. And unfortunately, because we don't have a direct say on that, everyone here, every equity group, every group that needs and deserves to be helped and supported, we are, tie-handed. So one thing COPE would be doing is assuring that there is a participatory process where the budget is also being consulted with organizations and people in the community so they have a say. We cannot just be rubber stamping budgets. We need to do more. We need to serve the community, and the priorities are very clear. We have people in the streets. We have women without houses. We have 30% of a lot of women who are earning less than 30% here in the city needing our support. So taking control of a budget in a participatory way is the first step that COPE would be doing to assure that we serve everyone that is needed in the city.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Next up, we will hear from TEAM. So do we have the representative from TEAM who will be answering?
Thank you. A very quick and easy initiative that TEAM would support right off the bat, I think I could say, are the washrooms in the parks, on the streets, of the busy streets, the beaches, because these are core municipal services, as well as the fact that they provide access to our public life on the streets, parks, beaches, to seniors, to women and children, to the disabled. If they are accessible, if they are clean, if they're safe, and if they are plentiful. The city needs far, far more public washrooms, and they need to be safe and clean and accessible.
That's great. Thank you, Cleta.
Hi, my name's Grace Kwan.
Sorry, Grace. No,
we could do both together.
No, only one person gets to answer the question.
Oh, I thought it was...
No, only one. So if you want some more time, do we have some more time? Yeah. Cleta, if you want to keep going. You're good? Oh, all right. Okay, thank you so much. And sorry for this confusion. So we're asking one person from each party to answer the question, not both. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for this, Cleta, and sorry for that confusion.
Earlier, if one person spoke and the other person, collectively, you still have to respect the time.
No. We're going to have one person from each party, and you get to decide which party, each party gets to decide which person gets to answer the question. Regardless of the time, yes. All right. Okay. Thank you so much, and apologies again for that. All right. Next, we will hear from ABC Vancouver, Rebecca. Bye.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. So I would actually agree. We've heard about participatory budgeting and how important it is for people to be able to engage and be reflected in the City of Vancouver's budget. I think there are many equity-seeking groups that would like to have a voice in that process. So I actually agree that and not to predetermine what those outcomes are, but to genuinely engage and hear from folks on what matters most. And in terms of the programs or the initiatives, you know, the first one that came to mind was our Chief Equity Officer. And so in this term, we hired, coming out of UBC, AFTAB. And AFTAB is our new CEO of a different sort and is doing fabulous work ensuring that we are taking an intersectional approach and applying an equity lens to every single thing we do at the City of Vancouver. So what I believe is the most important thing to start with is to maintain and fully fund that department. And the second, actually, again, in agreement, is the washroom strategy, but I think that we need to actually be adding more funding to that program specifically, and also mobile showers. We've heard many community members say that it's not just accessible washrooms in our parks, but mobile washrooms and mobile showers where needed.
Great, thank you so much for that. We'll now move on to the Green Party of Vancouver. Do you have your candidate who is selected to answer the question?
Hi, yes, so I'm Stephanie Smith here. We're also interested in a participatory budgeting process and in ensuring that the city's commitment to applying an equity lens to everything that it does includes the budgeting process, so that we make our budget with input from equity deserving groups instead of people having to come and wait while we make decisions based on the bottom line and start cutting programs. The one project that I'm thinking of that we would guarantee funding would be the women-led and diverse gender-led Indigenous Healing Lodge. I live in the downtown east side, and in that community, this has been, you know, an ask that people have been making for a really long time. We know that it's been frustrating for the community that the process has stalled, so we would fund it and move forward in consultation with the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations so that we could get that built.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. And our final respondent for the evening will be going to Vote Socialist, and Sean.
Yeah, some really good responses so far, and I would like to echo some of them, especially defunding the VPD, or, I mean, I would go further, I would defund the VPD by 50%, and reallocate that budget to equity deserving groups, basically groups that are already doing the work on the ground, that are already on the front lines, you know, helping to save people, you know, from the overdose crisis, the drug poisoning epidemic, as well as like Vancouver Tenants Union, Dolph, lots of groups that are already just doing the work. And what's beautiful about our platform is that we just kind of listen to a bunch of community groups, and we want to just raise those groups up. We want to fund those groups and elevate everybody. And that's what makes a Vancouver for all. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Sean. And thank you to everyone for answering that first round of questions. And again, apologies for the confusion for the first, for how we're going to organize this. Yes. We will be moving on to the second question here, which you will see up on the screen. So we have inhumane conditions in SROs right now. We have the climate crisis, we have the drug poisoning crisis, and discrimination means that for many who are living on the street, most housing options fail to meet their needs. If elected, how will you support residents of Vancouver who are living in encampments in ways that emphasize resident human rights and community safety rather than a heavy reliance on policing by force. So if elected, how will you support residents of Vancouver who are living in encampments in ways that emphasize resident human rights and community safety rather than a heavy reliance on policing by force? And we are going to hear from Progress Vancouver, then Forward Together, then Vision Vancouver, then NPA Vancouver, and finally One City Vancouver. And so I will go to our Progress Vancouver candidates. Do you have, or again, you just have one person here. So apologies for that. I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much for the question. The situation in SROs in Vancouver is untenable. We have a significant number of people who refuse to participate in the SRO system because the SROs are unsafe, and it's just inhuman to ask people to go into dangerous situations when they're safer outside. Progress Vancouver will offer temporary structured encampments to unhoused persons that will provide fundamental services, security, hygiene and cleaning, as well as lockups. This will allow people to not be forced to move daily or to find themselves in highly dangerous situations. This is a recommendation of the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness, and we buy into their recommendations. We're also going to ask the city to set up the Vancouver Civic Housing Commission, which is going to act as a landlord and buy up land and make it available for rental in a mixed affordability model, similar to Molehill Housing Society. If people are familiar with Molehill, we're going to bring together people who have a profound affordability difficulties with people who are slightly subsidized, with people who are paying full price, so as to remove the concentration of people in the SROs. And in doing that, we're going then to take an initiative to get rid of as many SROs as possible to replace them with community housing.
Yes, thank you for that. We will now go to Forward Together. Do you have your candidate who will answer? Right, Tessica.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Ginger. And I also wanted to thank Marissa Nahani for opening us up today and for the welcome. Hi, everyone. My name is Tessica Trong. I also go by Zhang Chiying, Zhang Qiying, and Trung Tuan. Those are really important to me that I share all of my names, not just my English names. I want to thank you all first for coming and listening. It's really clear that you care about this city. And I think that we're all fighting for the same things, and we just have different ways of approaching it. In terms of what Forward Together has proposed, and I'm really proud to share this new HEART program. It stands for Health and Addiction Response Team. And it's really a way for folks that are in crisis, that have mental health challenges, that have complex needs, to be supported with compassion. So it's not about criminalizing folks who are homeless or unhoused. Being homeless is not a crime, and for too long, we've been criminalizing poverty. So this approach really brings together a lens of compassion and providing the supports that folks need through an existing program in the city called 311, but adding an additional service so that we would have folks on the street, instead of calling the 911 on folks who are unhoused, who are in crisis, who need de-escalation, instead calling 311 to find supports that they need and to help work with other levels of government, whether that be federal or provincial, to get them long-term housing. So it's a program that I'm really proud of and actually was suggested by Sarah Blythe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We will now go to Vision Vancouver and Honye. There you go.
Thank you so much for the question. So unfortunately, the situation at SROs are not good these days, and we all know that. We at Vision Vancouver, we believe that everyone deserves an affordable, secure, and dignified place to live in. We have a very bold and practical housing plan that it is out there and everybody can live it, and we are going to implement it throughout the city and stop the bad situation we have these days. And related to the safety, we definitely believe that everyone deserves to feel safe and be safe. And no one is more in danger than people who are living on the streets and have no roof above their head. And how we can address this is to address this through housing, affordability in general, social justice, the sense of belonging, and livability in general. We will not be successful having a healthy and happy city by more law enforcement and policing. And I do not remember any city globally has been successful in this by more policing. And we do not want to criminalize people because of their financial situation or if they were under any kind of discrimination. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll now hear from MPA Vancouver.
Hi, my name is Arzu Zarabian, or in Farsi it's Arzu Zarabian. So a little bit of a background, I've spent 15 years working for the Vancouver Police Department as a crime analyst. I am a civilian, so not a police force member, but I have spent the last 8 years looking at what has caused this displacement, walking through the SROs in the downtown east side, walking with the people of the downtown east side, and actually getting to know the individuals. My heart personally breaks for the situation that has escalated in the last 2 years, but especially in the last year. And what I see is victimization of females in the SROs at a high rate, much higher rate than females living on the street. What we need to do is not warehouse individuals and cause SRO situations, but look at this model and the failure of this quote-unquote supportive housing, and look at regionalizing services and getting all levels of government involved for the wraparound services. This is not a policing issue. I think if you ask any police officer, they don't want to deal with this issue. This is a mental health issue. This is a trauma issue. This is an issue of women being victimized in the SROs. This is an issue of children being left on the street with their single parent household. And we're going to see a bigger crisis with this, with the budgets going the way they're going, with people living on a very low end means. And you're going to see much more of a population on the streets if we don't deal with this problem. So I am very passionate about it. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. And finally, One City Vancouver.
Tansei Matthew Norris and Sidigasan Lac La Ronge Tunita. Hello everyone, my name is Matthew Norris. I'm a member of the Lac La Ronge First Nation in Northern Saskatchewan. I'm also president of the Urban Native Youth Association here in Vancouver. At ANYA, we work with vulnerable Indigenous youth throughout the city, but often who live on the downtown east side. We know that the humanitarian crisis that is existing right now in this city is a direct result of systemic failures in a lot of our public institutions, in our mental health care programs, in our health institutions, in our education institutions, in our justice institutions. At One City, we're going to address the root causes of this problem by expediting social supportive Indigenous housing, cooperative housing in every neighborhood in Vancouver, by creating a rental advocacy office, which will hold SROs accountable to the living conditions within their buildings. And we're going to take a new approach to handling mental health emergencies and substance use crisis by introducing the PAC system, which is a tried and tested peer assisted care teams, which are tested in New West, North Vancouver, and Victoria, to provide an alternative to the policing model, which too often results in tragedy and escalation with members in the downtown east side. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. We're getting into a lot of solid answers from folks here on a lot of difficult topics for folks who have really been marginalized across the city, especially in the area of housing and the downtown east side. So thank you for those responses. We're going to be moving on to our next question, which you'll see up on the screen here. So, the Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action establish that the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which sets the minimum standards for Indigenous peoples' human rights and freedoms, should be the framework for reconciliation. In Articles 21 and 23, the UNDRIP states that Indigenous peoples have the right to develop priorities and strategies for exercising their right to economic development, including with respect for housing. So the question is, with the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations finally in a position to determine urban planning in their unceded homelands, how will your party protect and strengthen MST's rights to economic development and self-determination? With the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations finally in a position to determine urban planning in their unceded homelands, how will your party protect and strengthen MST's rights to economic development and self-determination? And we will hear from Forward Together, then COPE, then Vote Socialist, then Team, and finally the Green Party of Vancouver. So who from Forward Together will answer this question? Okay, great.
My name is Dulcie Anderson, and my pronouns are she and her, and I'm running with Forward Together. And I, for one, am extraordinarily excited about the Indigenous-led development that is happening right now in Vancouver. It's one of the reasons I'm running, honestly, is to support this, this amazing moment that we have in our city. And I think that you will find that Forward Together as a group, we recognize the housing crisis is the crisis that it is, and we are interested in working with all levels of government and all possible partners to create a more equitable city for everybody. And we are, we're here in order to do the work. We want to create every sort of housing all over the city for all people, and Indigenous-led development in this city is leading the way. Is leading the way for all of us, and that is what we plan to do. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We will now hear from Forward Together. Oh, sorry.
I'll go.
No, sorry. No. Yeah, my little check marks here need to be a little bit bigger. We will now hear from COPE. Who from COPE will be taking that question? Okay.
Hi there, good evening. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Tanya Webking, and I am Dene German from the Tricho Nation and Northwest Territories. I've called Vancouver home for 30 years, and I've been a guest here trying to do the good work. And when we talk about MST, we have to remind ourselves that it sounds really segregating, right? You are on stolen and unceded land. So these are the voices that we should all be uplifting. And the first and, to me, obvious way to get reconciliation and to move these initiatives forward is by voting for Indigenous councillors and Indigenous mayors, which we hope to have one day. You know, I don't need to hear from colonizers what reconciliation looks like. I think it's time to follow Indigenous leadership, and one of those initiatives should be that MST have places on City Council. I would like to see one for each, leaving 7 up to the rest. That is equity building. We need to decolonize City Hall. We need to decolonize all of these systems of power. So until we step into reconciliation, decolonizing will not happen. Masicho.
Thank you. We will now hear from Sean in Vote Socialist.
Incredible answer, Tanya. I fully support that as well. One thing that really struck me about my party was when they came to me was they said a few things, but they said one thing that's going to be on the ballot is land back. And I hadn't heard that from a political party. I'm not even sure if it's even possible, but it's something that we should really push for. I know this is a colonial system that we're working in, and that, you know, I think Tanya recognizes that too, and we need to decolonize that. But one thing that really jumped out at me was that we would return land. It's as simple as that. The city owns 3 golf courses. Return that land. Let the MST build on that land, however they see fit. It might seem like a kind of a simple answer, but I mean that's something that's it's so simple that it's kind of revolutionary in my mind. Another thing is the right of first refusal any building that's sold, any rental building, any housing stock that's sold in the city, first right of refusal should go to Indigenous peoples. And they get to say whether or not they want to buy that and turn that into their own housing. And then another thing that's in the platform is a voluntary restitution tax, 5 to 10% on top of your property tax. Put your money where your mouth is. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We will now hear from team.
Hi, I'm Grace Kwan. Team for Liverpool, Vancouver, we believe in a voice for all neighborhoods. So that includes engaging all residents to ensure the success of the MST and economic development. We want to enhance collaboration with local First Nations and urban Indigenous communities, work to resolve inequities through the implementation of the Truth and Reconciliation calls to actions that are applicable at the city level, strive to create economic opportunities for local First Nations, better coordinate with First Nations Health Authority to support their mental health and addiction programming, create new funding and partnership opportunities for childcare programs for Indigenous peoples, strive to increase the visibility of First Nations cultures, histories in public spaces such as community centers, libraries, park facilities, including delivery of urban longhouse and or cultural center. So it's pretty broad what team plans to do. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Grace. We will now hear from the Green Party of Vancouver.
Hi everyone, my name is Devyani Singh. As a woman of color and coming from a previously colonized land, this is very important and close to my heart because the last thing I want to do as someone who's immigrated to this country is to become part of the systemic colonization. And so I'm truly deeply committed to decolonization at all levels of government and truly working with the Indigenous people who have been stewards of this land for centuries. So to start that, I would do whatever it is to work with the Indigenous people because it is their land and they should have the right to say and be part of the economic development of this land which has been denied to them, which has been taken away from them, which has been stolen from them. For that reason, I've been really excited to see what's happening with Heatherlands, what's happening with the down in, near Barad Bridge, and looking forward to what's going to happen with Jericho lands. So as Greens, we fully support reconciliation, and it is something close to my heart, and I feel deeply about it. I understand what it is like to be colonized. I am the first generation born in free India. At least, like I say, we got rid of our colonizers. So the last thing I want to be is become one, and the Greens truly support this. So we truly agree. We will find ways. We will work with the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh, and urban Indigenous people, and find innovative ways to include them at all levels of government and decolonize and truly work with them to make use of these opportunities. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Devyani. And thank you to Women Transforming Cities for providing a question that speaks to Indigenous self-determination in a municipal election for a major city in Canada. I think it's about time that we start to have these discussions in all of our cities across the country. So thank you to Women Transforming Cities for this. The next question will look at housing. So 89% of survey respondents throughout the Women Transforming City engagement process and their Hot Pink Paper campaign told us that housing is their #1 issue this election, and the need for co-op and nonprofit housing was mentioned over 40 times during community engagement sessions. And despite this, previous efforts to build nonprofit, co-op, and social housing have seen backlash from some community members. How will you ensure greater housing options are available, specifically for unhoused residents and those who otherwise need it most, in the face of resistance from other community members? And we will hear from ABC Vancouver, then Progress Vancouver, Vision Vancouver, MPA Vancouver, and then One City Vancouver. So we will hear from ABC Vancouver first.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. ABC Vancouver, and I'm proud to say that over my term of 4 years, have voted in support
of strongly in support of all development, all housing, specifically related to supportive housing. We know that this question is coming on the heels of a very contentious decision around Arbutus and 8th. And for those that don't know, it's a supportive housing building, 12 stories in Kitsilano. And I was very proud to have voted in the affirmative with a slight majority on council, unfortunately, but where I think that vote really needed to be a strong majority to send the right message that housing folks is a priority for our city and house folks is a priority. In addition to that, I was also proud to move forward the first right of refusal motion as an amendment to the Vancouver plan. And that's because we can provide the deepest affordability of housing on city-owned land, but we do not have any tool in the toolbox to identify land that is a priority for us near amenities, schools, community centers, transit, and put ourselves at the front of the line when it comes to purchasing that land and then being able to support building that with provincial partners and federal partners. So those are two things. Also improving permitting, but I'm out of time.
Great, thank you. We will now hear from Progress Vancouver. Morgan.
Thank you for the question. Progress Vancouver is going to increase the supply of housing to bring prices down. To make this possible, we're going to change the zoning laws to allow multifamily housing without hearings, which matches the hot pink paper ask. We're going to subsidize affordable housing with market price housing in mixed income buildings, which is the model I discussed previously with the VCHC. And we're going to get federal government back into the responsibility of building affordable housing, and we're going to work with the provincial government to further add BC housing supports. The outcome of this is going to be mixed-use, diverse housing available for rental at large scale in Vancouver. We're looking at 14,000 units per year-ish, so 130-something thousand over 10 years. And the intention is to make it so that we can take from the high-yield rentals and use that money to put into the low-yield rentals where we're subsidizing residents. And this is going to allow us to take people out of the SRO system, and it's going to allow us to take people out of on-street homelessness or in the encampments that we've made available to them to get them back into housing and to grow their resilience in a neighborhood that looks after them and that treats them like human beings. Because the number one factor for resilience is housing, stability, and security.
Thank you. We will now hear from Vision Vancouver. Leslie?
Thanks, Ginger, and thanks for the question. I think there are a number of folks on the current City Council who do support more housing for people in neighborhoods around the city, but what we've seen over the past 4 years is this council struggled to get things done and to move ahead on those priorities, which I know that many of these folks hold. So Vision Vancouver is calling for a vote within 90 days of the election on citywide zoning reform that will open up all Vancouver neighborhoods to low and mid-rise multifamily housing. You know, we talk to folks on the doors and they ask us, do you want more housing in every part of the city? And we're unapologetically yes is the answer to that question. We'll also support the removal of public hearing requirements for all below market housing, including nonprofit, public, and co-op housing. As the question suggests, there is a lot of concern in some neighborhoods about change and what it means for neighborhoods. And we understand that and recognize that, and we'll continue to work with neighborhoods to work through some of those issues, but our priority has to be to make sure that people who need housing have access to it, again, in neighborhoods throughout the city. Thanks.
Great, thank you. We will now hear from NPA Vancouver. Melissa?
Thanks very much. I'll just start by saying that I'm not going to make promises that I can't keep. We've already heard that from previous governments that promised to end homelessness in 10 years, and we never saw that. I think that we all have to work collaboratively together. And I'll tell you, first of all, as a two-term city councilor, one of the things that I am very proud of that I've been able to accomplish, and that's a short program, which is social housing or rental tenure, which actually puts all of the applications for low barrier and social housing to the top of the list, so it allows them to be more affordable and to be built first. I think we need to do more. Right now, that was a pilot. It's now turned into a larger program, but we still don't include rental tenure alone in that. So I think we need to include housing across the continuum. We're talking about unhoused residents specifically in this question, but let's look at new models of housing instead of building low barrier housing that we know people do not want to live in, as my colleague said before. We have to look outside the box. We also need affordable homeownership for other people in our city struggling to survive. And I think we should look at co-housing as they have in Europe. And I could talk about that all day long, but I already see the hand up. So I'll end there, but please come and find me later if you'd like to speak about it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And we will be providing everybody time to speak with the candidates after this, so I know there's a lot to get through. We'll now hear from one city. Do you have your speaker? Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Iona Bonami, but my parents call me Tao Si Wing, which is my Chinese name. Our current elected one city councillor, Christine Boyle, brought forward a motion a little while ago to streamline the process to have social housing to be built, more easily built across the city. But unfortunately, council did not support that, and that was very discouraging. For one city, the big priority for us is to make it easier to build all types of housing, supportive, social housing, rental housing, as well as condos. Over 75% of our land right now is zoned for single-family homes. What we want to do is change our zoning bylaw so that we can build 4-story condos or 6-story rentals. And if you're building non-market social supportive housing or co-ops, you're able to build higher and you're able to do it faster. So instead of going through a 2 or 3 year rezoning process, we can streamline, make it easier and less costly to build. We also want to have more supportive services and distributed throughout the city with the supportive housing. It can't be just focused in the downtown east side or East Vancouver. We really need to ensure everyone is able to live in any neighborhood within the city. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And, you know, to remind everyone here, well, I don't think we need any reminding. This is such a significant issue when it comes to equity in our city. Everyone deserves to have a home, and it's up to our decision makers in council to ensure that absolutely happens, and we can always do better. So thank you for all of the responses. On to our next question. On the topic of safety, we heard repeatedly in our community engagement that many Vancouver residents do not feel comfortable calling the police, and that the lack of culturally appropriate crisis support and prevention services contribute to feeling unsafe and to the belief that Vancouver is not a place that they belong. Given the VPD's handling of both historic and more recent cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women, this is especially true for Indigenous residents of Vancouver. So the question is, what alternative models, programs, and initiatives for community safety will you look to support if you're elected? And how will you ensure that Indigenous women and girls can safely access these services? So we will hear from Vote Socialist, then COPE, then the Green Party of Vancouver, then ABC Vancouver, and finally Team. So we will go to Sean with Vote Socialist.
Yeah, this is a really personal subject for me. As somebody who was arrested under the Mental Health Act by the VPD, undergoing a crisis, they had absolutely no idea what they were doing, and it was terrifying. It was the most scary feeling I've ever felt in my life. Add on to that, my partner's best friend was murdered by the VPD. 8 officers stomped him to death. The family had to sue for the report, and they blocked it at every turn. So it's a very emotional, I'm sorry if I get emotional, but it's a very, very important thing for me that the status quo is not working. Sorry, can you, it's talking right in my ear. Show some respect, please. yeah, we just need an alternative to the status quo. We absolutely need peer support-led networks. Some of the other parties are offering some similar things. One city's offering some very interesting things. I would support that too. But yeah, like I said, it's a very emotional thing for me. I was arrested just walking out the door one day. You know, it's just, and I'm a white cis het man. You know, that I can take this. But there's people every day that are criminalized for their skin color, for their gender, for being Indigenous on these lands, and it's not right. So we need to change the status quo.
Great, thank you, and sorry to hear that, Sean. We'll now hear from COPE. Do we have the respondent? Okay, Tanya.
Hi, it's Tanya, actually. Thank you.
Tanya.
Yeah, again, this is an incredibly personal situation as an Indigenous woman. You know, butterflies in spirit should not exist, but it does. Very grateful for their community work and for the support that they offer. We call ourselves a city of reconciliation. You can check the city website. We cannot continue with colonial systems of violence and have reconciliation. They are imposing forces. We definitely need to dismantle the system as it currently is and reimagine safety. We have definitely talked about having community-led safety. And as someone that has worked in the downtown east side since 1996 in mental health and addictions, I have never once murdered anyone. I've never been injured. I have disarmed people in highly psychotic places. So it can be done, but education, training, that matters. So to help women and girls, we would like to get a matriarch-led task force. Breen Willette, who is running alongside with us, has already done this in Saskatoon. We want to have that model here. Bring matriarchs in. Masicho.
Great, thank you, Tanya. And a reminder to everyone to please put your phones on silent. Yes, thank you for that. We're now going to hear from the Green Party of Canada. Vancouver? Sorry. Yes, there is a big difference, and we know that here in Vancouver especially. So the Green Party of Vancouver, thank you so much, and apologies.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't be launching into this question laughing. I live in the downtown east side. Indigenous women are disappearing from the street still. You know, the community understands that there's another or the same serial killer. People, especially Indigenous women, don't feel safe going to the police because they believe that they will not be afforded the protection of the state. And, you know, there are many people in my community that are not afforded the protection of the state. And the people who prey on them know that they are not afforded the protection of the state, and that is what makes it possible to victimize them. You know, I'm sorry, I've been thinking a lot because there's been a lot of pain and a lot of fear again in the community lately. It's a really difficult time. You know, a lot of us are talking about different approaches to community safety, different models with peer outreach. Our Green folks at Council have also proposed some models. I'm glad that we have broad agreement on those points. I would also say that community safety begins with ensuring that people have safe, secure, dignified housing, adequate. I'm sorry, I'm out of time.
Yes, thank you so much, Stephanie. We will now hear from ABC Vancouver.
Thank you very much, Ginger, and thanks for the question. So, you know, I just want to echo comments here of other candidates who are acknowledging the very real fears that exist for women, Indigenous women and girls in accessing all services, in fact. And, you know, we've heard even today about the day-to-day fear of an Indigenous mother in the protection of their baby and the systemic racism that exists in
our society, in every single structure of our society, that puts a different, and as a cisgendered white woman, I know that I have inherent privilege in that, and that is the responsibility of your elected council, whoever it is that is elected, is to recognize that first and foremost, and that there are, and I will say, it took, I've spent my 4 years and beyond unlearning and rethinking and educating myself and finding out, and it's not on anyone else's responsibility to do that for me, it's on me. So I think that that's the starting point that we come to in this conversation. I know I'm going to be out of time. There are alternative models. I do support them, and I think there's a bridge that we have to cross to get there, and that's what we're talking about right now. We're at a moment in time where we have to figure out how do we cross that bridge, because there's certainly police work that should not be done by police, and the police agree.
Thank you. And finally, we will hear from team, and it looks like Grace. Okay, thank you.
Grace will take it. Thank you. As a visible minority person, I also live in the downtown east side, and I see racism and classism actually in action everywhere. And one of the things that we want to provide is another authority that can provide a due diligence, accountability, and oversight. So team is proposing having a commissioner overarching all the amenities. The purpose for that would be to provide a sort of an ombudsman approach, so that people who are not getting the right responses from the traditional forces or different services, they have someone they can go to. The second thing that they would provide is a harmonization of the different levels of government and a one-stop shop. There are 238 different agencies operating in the downtown east side, and it's difficult to navigate. So imagine if you're suffering mental health or trauma of some kind, addiction, you have family. There are many different agencies that could be working at cross purposes. The commissioner would provide a one-stop stop and make life a lot easier for both the end user and for the different agencies to coordinate and harmonize.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And thank you everyone for your responses. I think we know that we all bring a lot of different experiences to the issue of feeling safe or unsafe in the city. And this is something that is only going to grow and absolutely needs these discussions on these alternative models, because that is what our community is asking for, and they deserve it. So thank you for that. We'll be moving on to our next question, which is looking at the poison drug crisis in our city. We know that 6 people a day are dying in British Columbia due to the poison drug crisis, and many of the casualties of this crisis are residents of Vancouver. The response from all levels of government has been inadequate, and we are not doing enough or fast enough to save lives. The question is, what are the solutions, short and long term, you want to see implemented within the next term? We will hear from One City Vancouver, then Vision Vancouver, then NPA Vancouver, then Forward Together, and finally Progress Vancouver. So One City Vancouver, who will be providing a response? Matthew.
This is a dire humanitarian crisis. I know I've said that before, but it's worth saying again. The poison drug supply in Vancouver is the leading cause of death in this city. We've lost nearly over 360 people this year alone to poison drug supply. It's often talked about as a crisis that's only impacting the unhoused or those struggling with poverty, but it's not. Those are just the most visible people struggling with this party or with this crisis. It is of utmost necessity that we tackle it. One City Vancouver is proposing increased access to safe supply throughout the city as a way to immediately stop the deaths from poison drug supply. We would like to advocate to the provincial government for decriminalization so that we stop the unneeded criminalization and arrest and harassment of individuals living on the downtown east side who are using substances. And we also need to expedite housing. Housing has been proven to be one of the #1 stepping stones for living a healthier life and addressing these systemic inequities within our city. And that will be a key platform that One City is proposing. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll hear from Vision Vancouver. Hanye?
And thank you so much for the question. Again, my name is Hanie Barzegari. This is a very important matter to me because I'm a medical doctor in background. And when I used to practice in my country of origin, Iran, I used to work with mental health patients, their families, and drug users. Unfortunately, we keep saying that we have mental health crisis, opioid crisis in our city, but we do not take any action. I know health is a provincial matter. However, at a city level, we can do way more than this. We need to collaborate with Vancouver Coastal Health, with the provincial and federal governments to end the issue that we have here. We have so many people who are unfortunately under racialized trauma, and their issues have not been addressed at all. And we need to take action for this. I agree with what Mario mentioned regarding the safe supply. It should not be criminalized. We have to have a proper environment for these people to get the proper care. If we even talk about housing for them, we need to make sure that the care coordination is there for them, because we do not want them to get back on the streets and being victimized or taken by police again. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, we will hear from NPA Vancouver.
Hi, Arzu Zarabian. I just want to discuss that this is indeed a crisis, and we have an action plan as the NPA. It's a matter that's very serious to us, and what we think is the treatment option has been lacking in the 4 pillars approach. I am a huge proponent of the safe supply, but without treatment, it doesn't resolve any issues. I know of many instances where individuals are waiting up to 3 years for a treatment bed because they don't have the funds or the support or the family behind them to get the treatment they so desperately need and want themselves, and it's not forced. This is something that needs to be addressed. This has to be, again, like some of my colleagues have said in this room, it is a provincial issue, but we need to make it a priority as a city, as we are in the midst of the biggest opioid crisis as a city in BC. So this would be part of the looking back at the 4 pillars approach, as I said, and really bringing in the services from the provincial and medical institutions to try and solve this crisis with the proper approach.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Forward Together.
So I think one of the first things to acknowledge about this question is just the people we're losing are our children, and they're our brothers and our sisters, that this is a very human cost to all of us, and that we can't lose sight of that, that it matters. It matters to us and to the families of the people that we're losing every day. I think the important things that Forward Together stands for are to definitely safe supply and to continue to decriminalize the possession of small amounts of drugs. But over and beyond that, I think that we need to address the issue as if we care, as if we really care about what happens to people. And I think that we have made some steps forward by partnering with the provincial government to provide complex care housing, which is run by Vancouver Coastal Health and actually offers people with expertise in both addictions and in substance use, and that can actually help to house and hold people who struggle with these issues, who are often deeply traumatized I think that housing will be a very key component of our solution to this issue because it is traumatizing to live on the street. It is traumatizing to be insecure. So thank you.
Thank you, Dulcie. And finally, we will hear from Progress Vancouver.
Thank you very much for the question. Decriminalization has happened in Canada. Small supplies of opioids are legal to carry, and there hasn't been a drug conviction in Vancouver for years and years and years, more than a decade. Progress Vancouver will apply safe supply ideology and support detection of poison drug supply by putting into use mass spectrometers to detect poisoned substances. They will be put into pharmacies. We will work with pharmacies to get that service done at a wider scale than it is available now. We will set up tax incentives for family practitioners that are supporting people going through treatment so that they can go to our family doctors to access support. We will stand up sober housing options, especially in the SROs, because right now people do not have an option to get dry. And the joke that I've heard so often is, how do you quit smoking if the place where you live gives you a pack a day? We're going to set up sharps disposal in public toilets to make it easier to keep the surrounding population safe. And finally, we're going to work closely with the Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction and BC Housing to increase treatment, residential treatment in particular. This is very important. The lack of treatment is a major issue.
Thank you for that. And thank you everyone for answering this question. I think this is something that we don't want to see continuing over the next term for people in the city and across the province. And there is a lot of hope that Vancouver can be a leader in ensuring that we can provide safety to people who absolutely deserve it, our friends and our family members. This is a really difficult and scary time for all of them. So thank you for your answers. The next question that we'll be going to is looking at people with disabilities. And so the question is, how will you prioritize the health, well-being, and safety of people with a disability in the city? And how have you used a disability and accessibility lens in your platform development? So we will hear from the NPA Vancouver, then One City, then COPE, then Progress Vancouver, then Forward Together. And so we will go to NPA, who will be providing the response.
Thanks very much, Ginger. There's so much to say in my answer in 90 seconds, but first of all, I want to recognize former Mayor Sam Sullivan, who was an NPA mayor, and he also championed many of the accessible features we see in our city today. Although that plan isn't fully built out, Sam himself is in a wheelchair, and I actually worked with Sam and learned a lot from him. But also, being a city councillor, and before that a park board commissioner, I've had the honor of sitting as a liaison to the Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee. And I think that there's some ideas there that we can't decide and plan for people who have a disability. We need to open our minds, our ears, and City Hall. I see how difficult it is for people to even come and share their perspectives with us at the city. So I think we have to do what we can, and that's from a government and policy perspective, but we need to make sure that we're doing what we can with lighting, with our streets and sidewalks. We have to start with the low-hanging fruit, and I know so many stories that I hear from people that just can't get up a flight of stairs, and there are city responsibilities there. So when we talk about core services, making our city accessible place has to be number one, and I could go on, but I think the lens has to be, this is a city that we have to create through that lens of people with disabilities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Next, we will hear from One City Vancouver. Iona?
Hi. So the way we've been building our city is to separate uses. You live in one area, you shop in another area. That makes it really hard to get around without a vehicle. What we really need to do is make sure we have whole communities, so you are able to go down the street and just pick up your groceries. That makes a huge difference in making sure that people with disabilities are able to get around and access food and community services. I'm a transportation planner. I've been doing that for over 13 years. And so I think about universal accessibility in my work a lot, in particular around transit, making sure our transit services, not just the buses, but also our bus stops are universally accessible. So we need to make sure we have bus shelters, we have seating at all of our stops, and also ensuring people with visual disability and audio disability are also accommodated. We've also talked about public washrooms. That is an important necessity for people with disabilities, but for everyone as well. For someone who has limited mobility, it is a big challenge for them to go outside of their home if they don't know if they can find a washroom. And last thing, I would say that a lot of our walking environment is still missing sidewalks and accessible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. Next, we will hear from Cope.
Thank you very much. How do I see it with a lens? I have to ask people who are in disability groups. We have to create the mechanism for them to find out what are the basic needs. But I would say, on top of my head, if I had a disability, I couldn't work, I have 25% increase in rent every year. If I would have to go to the grocery store and I have to see that the prices are going and my welfare rates are staying the same, I will be very worried, will be very sick. And we are not doing much of that. What I would do, first of all, we have to advocate for more increases in welfare rates. That will give people a lot of peace of mind. We would have to have rent control. We need to assure people that where they're living, they're gonna stay for a long time. And that those places, SROs, as horrible as they are, they're housing 4,000 people. There's nothing else cheaper than that. So we need to get elevators, we have to have funding there. What else we can listen? I think I work with children in the spectrum for the last 10 years, and I know housing. Building co-ops and housing and rental purpose housing and thinking in all these groups is essential. We have mansion tax that was defeated for one vote a few months ago that will give enough money to not only house people that are in the streets, but also to house, to construct co-ops and many other issues.
Thank you.
So thank you. We need to think of them. We're just an instrument.
Thank you, Nancy.
We're just an instrument, a vehicle.
Yes, thank you so much for that answer, Nancy. Much appreciated. Next, we will hear from Progress Vancouver.
Thank you very much for your question. The entire Progress Vancouver platform has been reviewed by multiple disability advocates inside of Progress Vancouver and also through our family members. More than one of our family members lives with disability. And I don't talk about my disability, but I have a disability situation. The Progress Vancouver specific measures that we're going to do beyond looking at the intersectional lens that I've spent the last decade applying on institutions in Canada and in BC, we're specifically going to enforce functional guidelines in city buildings by running them through experts on the matter, and the experts on the matter are people who face disability and face barriers. We're going to look at it from the point of view of accessibility in the physical space and also accessibility of the experiential space. Being able to experience the space is as important as being able to get into the space. And we're also going to look at the ability to access City of Vancouver institutions and services when we do not have all of the capabilities that sometimes are assumed to exist. For example, having to climb a slope, accessing the internet, understanding complex language, or having even high-speed internet, which is a disability situation in Vancouver.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for those answers. And, you know, I have to say personally, it's been a real learning journey to understand how ableist our urban planning has been. And I put my hands up in thanks to all of the people with disability, voices and advocates who have been sharing with us something that should have been obvious but hasn't. And I think that is really why we're focusing on equity in this forum today.
Sorry, Ginger. Do you mind if I go as well?
Oh.
No worries. It's
Yes,
all good.
sorry.
There's a lot of us.
Yep, sorry. Yes, Tessica.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ginger. And thank you for the question. I think this is why the first recommendation that the Women Transforming Cities has really put forward around bringing this equity lens on councillor motions is so critical, because it's about bringing a class, a disability, age, race, like whichever. I think it's really about intersectionality. And one of the reasons why I was really, really proud to run with Forward Together is that I truly believe that the team that I'm running with represents the diversity of lived experiences in this city. And Hillary Brown has been a long-time advocate for disability justice. He's in a wheelchair. He spent most of the time in his wheelchair, and he's made life better, not just for himself, but also for folks with physical disabilities. But I think beyond that, what is so important, and I really appreciated what you shared, is this principle that I work on, and that many of us work on, where it's nothing about us without us, right? And so it's working, as Morgan, as you said, with disability advocates, working with the Persons of Disabilities Advisory Council of the city, working with folks who have those lived experiences to listen to them. So whether it comes to universal design, to walkable streets, to curbs, there's a diversity of solutions, and those solutions have been shared to us through recommendations, and it's a matter of funding and prioritizing them. And so I know that the Forward Together team would be advocates for that. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And I'm fired. Get me off the stage. Yes, sorry. We'll be moving on to our next question, and we'll be looking at trans inclusion. So the question is, trans women in Vancouver face disproportionate barriers to housing and safety, which came up during our community survey and focus groups. Specific policies are needed that address their unique experiences. So how will you protect trans rights and improve their sense of belonging in Vancouver? And we will hear from the Green Party of Vancouver, then ABC Vancouver, then Team, then Vote Socialist, then Vision Vancouver. So we will go to the Green Party of Vancouver first, who will be providing an answer.
Hi everyone, Devyani here. Thank you for this question, because I feel that sometimes when we talk about the 2S LGBTQ IA plus community, we often, the trans people get ignored. And this is a question that's close to me. I identify as part of that community. And I've often said that, I still come from a place of privilege because, I don't face half the discrimination as my trans friends do. I am close friends with a lot of trans people, and I see the discrimination they have to go through on a daily basis. When it comes to housing, you go to look at a rental place, and the moment people see you, you get denied, or somebody else gets the place. This is important. We need to educate. We need to have more trans visibility. We need to make sure we are there for our friends, our family, our brothers and sisters. And what can we do to protect trans rights and improve their sense of belonging in Vancouver? There's a lot that needs to be done, starting with education, starting with creating communities and spaces where we feel safe. A simple thing like having a bathroom. And over here, I know that Women's Transforming Cities took care, but it wasn't with an apology that there are gendered bathrooms down there, right? What about the non-binary bathrooms? We need to make spaces accessible. As a person who's not trans, I can rarely go to a bathroom without being told I'm in the wrong space. So imagine how much worse it is for them. We have to do more. So we'll do everything we can, and we'll work with them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Devyani. We will now hear from ABC Vancouver.
Thanks very much, Ginger, and I appreciate this question.
So this actually does hit quite home, close to home for me. I am a queer woman and have been married to my partner for 12 years who's non-binary. And I've been with my partner through that transition, and we come from, you know, privilege. So I can just, and by privilege I mean we're both white, we're both employed, we both have housing. I don't mean financial privilege, I mean some of the basics that we take for granted. So it does get my juices flowing, so to speak, in terms of getting that sort of vibration and nervousness, because it is just so incredibly personal. All that to say, I think as a city, we must continue to daylight the inequities that people are not seeing, and the suffering of the trans community in the face of those inequities, and the shame. And I think that what it stands out to me is it is quite likely one of the most courageous things a human being can do is claim their gender. And I feel emotional talking about it because I've seen that journey, and I think we can't put any assumptions or any of our own perspectives or opinions on anybody that takes that journey, because it's lonely, it's important, it's changing the world, and I'll tell you,
Yes,
it's about young people.
Sorry to cut you off, Rebecca.
I get it.
Yes, I
Thanks.
know, a very, very heartfelt response. Thank you so much for that. We will now move on to team, and we will hear from Cleta.
Hi, it's Cleta Brown speaking. This question reminds me of the experiences and the strategies that were employed in the civil rights movement, in the women's fight for rights, and Indigenous fight for rights and land and recognition. I think what we need to do is take a similar approach in terms of valuing and respecting the voices, listening to them, including these voices in our deliberations at all phases of deliberating, of imagining, of planning, of proposals, whatever we come up with. But most importantly, not saying to a community, this is what you need, this is the best thing for you, but listening to what they tell us that they need and what they want, and respecting that. We also have to, of course, represent the other communities at the same time, and it's sometimes a challenging balancing act, exercise that we have to go through, but we always have to remember that we value and respect all peoples, and that we've done this before in other rights struggles.
Thank you so much, Cleta. We'll now hear from Vote Socialist.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a new issue for me. I haven't really experienced this in my life. It's been a long learning process, like a lot of people have said about listening. I asked Morgan if she wanted to take my question in my stead, because I really don't know enough about it, and that's kind of what our platform is about. It's about listening to those groups, about creating more inclusionary spaces. That starts also obviously with housing, but you know, more inclusive bathrooms as well, and more inclusive spaces, and funding groups, you know, creating more shelter spaces for trans people as well, and also just fighting some of the bigotry. There's people on this panel that whose parties have held anti-SOGI beliefs, and we can't stand for that. We have to fight that at every level. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Vision Vancouver. Honier.
Haniye Barzegari here. So as you can see, I'm a woman of color and an immigrant. So having a lens of equity is very important from my personal perspective as well. I live in West End now, and we have a very diverse community in West End. We are not just a community, like family. And I had the experience to learn from trans people in my community. I'm so proud to say that we at Vision Vancouver, we led trans inclusive policies in our community centers as well as in the schools. And it is the work that we had already done in the previous governments and what we are going to build on if hopefully we get elected with the school board and park board, and how it is important for our younger generations to make sure that nobody will get bullied for their preferences, and making sure that we can have a very inclusive city where everybody feels that they belong and they can thrive. We need to have a city which works for everyone. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for that. We are close to the end of our evening. Our next question, not our final question, but our second to last question, is looking at tenant protection. And the question is, in our community engagement, we asked people if they believe that Vancouver is a city where they belong. There was a significant difference in the response from homeowners and renters. 72% of homeowners answered yes, that they do belong, compared to 25% of renters. How will your party work to ensure that all renters in the city have secure, affordable, and safe housing? We will hear from sorry, there's some different notes on my page here from up there. So I'll go from the screen. We will hear from COPE, then TEAM, then ABC Vancouver, then the Green Party of Vancouver, then Vote Socialist. So who from COPE would like to answer first?
One of the main things that COPE has been running for is rent control. We need to have rent control because people don't know if the next month, their building is going to be bought for a big company and they're going to be sent out. We need to have, in this moment, in this crisis that we are living right now, people have to have security on their head. That's why rent control will allow people to have certainty, between tenancies, and when the people go out, the rent will be attached to the unit and not to the person. And therefore, the motivation for renovations will go down. We need to assure that people feel secure that they're going to be in that same place, to build community, to be participating in everything that they do. I don't know if you know, but we have 30% of women are earning, 40% of women are earning 30,000 a year. Minimum wage. How do we expect people to stay in this community, to vibrate, to be fully participating if we don't allow them some break, knowing that the rent will be the same if they have to move out? The next place would be affordable. So please support rent control. We're not in a normal situation. This is a crisis situation, and we need to stand hard.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. Yes, sorry to cut you off. Thank you so much. We will now hear from TEAM. Who from TEAM will provide an answer? Grace.
Hi. Belong is about community. And community is created through community amenities such as community centers, green space. The Broadway plan is fundamentally flawed. The green space that is proposed in Broadway plan is instead of 1.1 hectare per 1,000 people, which is the standard for the city of Vancouver, it's going to go down to 0.35 per hectare, which is 1/4 of what the rest of Vancouver gets. That's just one of the things that the Broadway plan will provide or not provide for the residents. That's why Colleen Hardwick voted against it. It's also a plan with a fairly complicated plan to provide housing for the 3 or 4 years, then back to the developer will provide this back to a smaller space, which is guaranteed for only 24 months. So in fact, you would be providing these poor renters the 24 most stressful months of their lives. It doesn't work. Instead, what TEAM is providing is housing that is tagged to true affordability, which is 30% of your income, which is the standard by CMHC. and it would look at the one-third, one-third, one-third model as proposed in the False Creek South by Granville Island, which has been successfully designed by Colleen Hardwick's father, Walter Hardwick.
Thank you. Thank you, Grace, for that. We will now hear from ABC Vancouver. Rebecca?
Thank you very much, Ginger. So yes, there's a lot in this question. I just want to bring it back to secure, affordable, and safe housing. So ABC has committed to doubling the amount of co-ops, and by doing that through the first right of refusal bylaw. We are dealing with a 1% vacancy, so the argument that we can find deeper affordability without building new supply does not line up for me. We support the Broadway plan, and we supported it because 2/3 of it was rental and below market rental. I was a single mom at 21. I've rented my whole life in the city of Vancouver and continue to today. So I have a pretty clear experience of what it means to have a young family as a renter and then transition my daughter into her own rental now. I think purpose-built rental gives security of tenure. Pet-friendly buildings creates also a very important piece of that we raise and have raised at council and will continue to. And then I think it comes down to permitting. We need to get more units online faster, and we haven't talked a lot about it today. It's kind of boring, but it actually is where safe and affordable housing gets a bottleneck, and it's what we can control as a municipality. So we have to also deal with what can we advocate for, but what can we also control? And I think we can do a lot with permitting, and we can free up more units of all types of housing, including below market units, by improving our permitting system.
Great. Thank you. Next, we will hear from the Green Party of Vancouver. Stephanie?
Hi, thanks. I'm following from what Councillor Bly was saying. One of the things that we're thinking about doing is melding the development permit and rezoning processes together to streamline the development of affordable housing. I share the concern of my friends in COPE that we need to stabilize rents. We need to protect the affordable housing that we have now, and that means that we need to stabilize rent increases in between tenancies because we need to end evictions for profit in this city. Too many people are living in profound housing insecurity. One rent eviction, one dem eviction away from being priced out of the city forever, and that has to stop. We need right of first refusal at the same rents, integrated with the Residential Tenancy Act, provisions for additional rent increases so that people are allowed to return to their units and not face massive rent increases when there's renovations. We need to fast track the development of truly affordable housing tied to median renter household incomes as the benchmark on city lands. Right now we are using social housing metrics that are not actually the same as affordable housing metrics. So we need to tie real affordability to our city nonprofit housing processes. And finally, we need to use Vancouver's underutilized development corporation and start building affordable housing on city land.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And the final speaker for Vote Socialist.
Yeah, it's tough to follow up, Stephanie. I mean, I look up to you for a lot of things regarding rentals, and COPE as well. We would also implement vacancy control. But another thing that might not have been included is to support collective bargaining of tenants. Right now, it's really difficult for a tenant to go up like a kind of behemoth of a landlord, especially when now we're seeing kind of the financialization of real estate. And they're not really dealing with like mom and pop landlords anymore. We're dealing like with these massive corporations, and that kind of goes across the board. This is a crisis created by capitalism. Housing is a human right, and getting a return on your investment is not a human right. And I think only a broad socialist program is going to be able to solve this. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. And on to our final question of the evening. We are looking at the climate emergency, and I want to say before I go to the question that we do have an error. The third speaker will be from the NPA and not Vote Socialist. So we will be looking at the NPA to provide the answer in place of Vote Socialist on the screen. So apologies for that error. So the question is, in the midst of a climate emergency, we need to get people out of their cars and into alternative transportation options. How will you support low or zero carbon mobility in the city if you are elected? And we will hear from Vision Vancouver, then Progress Vancouver, then NPA, then One City Vancouver, and finally Forward Together. So who from Vision Vancouver will take this? Leslie.
Thanks, Ginger. And I love this question. The City of Vancouver, as many of you may know, has a climate emergency action plan with two main priorities, green buildings and transportation. That's how we're going to reduce our municipal carbon emissions, is by taking action in those two areas. Vision Vancouver has a strong record of leadership on active transportation in getting people able to bike and roll and walk throughout the city easily. And so we would support transit enhancements, as some of the other speakers have already mentioned, both within the city and regionally, to make it easier for people to enjoy transit. For us, that would also include extending the Broadway subway out to UBC so that students and folks on the west side can enjoy that option as well. We'd also aggressively tackle cycling and pedestrian safety in the city by prioritizing enhanced dedicated cycling infrastructure in 3 priority areas. That's Commercial Drive, Kingsway, and Stanley Park. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Progress Vancouver.
Thank you very much for the question. We were going to start with, like Vision Vancouver mentioned, extending the SkyTrain to UBC. This is going to have a significant impact on our carbon emissions. A second aspect of carbon emissions that we just don't look enough is people who commute that could be just living in Vancouver. Progress Vancouver's housing plan is to increase the number of starts in Vancouver significantly using low carbon emission construction products like engineered wood products. This is going to reduce the need to commute in and out of the city. It's going to provide a significant reduction in CO2 and other climate affecting gases. We are going to expand the protected bike lanes in Vancouver, which as we know are extremely popular and downright crowded. We need more capacity, and we're going to take advantage of our plan to add pedestrian spaces in a number of streets to just get cars away from places where we could do without them, including the downtown core. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Morgan. Next, we will hear from the NPA Vancouver.
Thanks very much. Again, only 90 seconds, very difficult, but I think that first of all, we have to look at increasing density of housing centered around transit stations. And I want to use an example of Broadway and Commercial, how long that project has been sitting on hold. And it's actually something that council was supposed to deal with this term, but didn't. So we moved, that being moved forward. I think that we have to look at applying things like the short program and expediting housing and incentivizing housing that is co-located with transit. And I want to go a step farther than that and say that we also need childcare centers. That's a question that didn't come up tonight. I was really hoping it would. But childcare also, in looking at equity in a lens, we need to make sure there's workforce housing, that people who live in Vancouver, who work in Vancouver, can stay in Vancouver. As Morgan said, I think that's really important. And I also think we have to look at making sure that we can coexist in a city where people feel not only comfortable and safe, but that it's convenient to not only drive a car, but also to walk and to cycle. I also want to say it took Vancouver a long time just to get in active transportation pieces such as, we've been squabbling over this last term on electric scooters and trying to make sure that there's not conflicts between different transportation modes, but that we work together. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Melissa, for that. Next, we will hear from One City Vancouver and Iona.
Yeah, so transportation, of course, is my passion. My reason for going into transportation planning is my concern around the climate impacts. Nearly 40% of our carbon emissions come from transportation at the city. And so as part of our platform for One City, as I mentioned, land use is really integral. Well, in transportation, we say a good land use plan is a good transportation plan. When you're planning all types of uses to be located close together, you're enabling people to walk or bike and transit to those places much more easily without having to get into a car. And so the climate emergency plan calls for 90% of people to be living within an easy walk or roll of their daily amenities. To do that, we need to locate our schools, community centers, shops, people where we live, all those need to be close together. And of course, we need to have good, safe walking and cycling infrastructure. We need to connect people directly to where they are shopping. So bike lanes directly to restaurants, to grocery stores. And then transit priority is something the city has control over. We can provide more bus lanes, more bus priority, and that is something that we can work with TransLink to make sure that transit is not stuck in congestion and it's much more viable to use.
Great, thank you. And finally, forward together.
Thank you so much, and thanks, Iona. I think that it speaks also to one of our platform promises around a 15-minute city and moving towards that, right? Where we live in it integrated, where we don't have to go somewhere to drop off our kids and then somewhere to work and then somewhere else to pick up our groceries, but that we can actually live in walkable and rollable communities as well. As someone who's dedicated my life to climate activism since I was a teen, I'm really proud of the team that I'm running with Alvin Singh, who's also here, who's also been working with the David Suzuki Foundation, Jeanette Ash, who's also here in the room. But the reason, and I'm really proud that today we announced not just that extension to UBC, but actually making a Vancouver loop, connecting it back from UBC to Metrotown, and actually going through the south part of Vancouver. And this is, if we're talking about an intersectional lens, this is from a geographic, a racial equity, from a class equity, an age equity, a mobility, disability equity. It is a piece of public infrastructure that will benefit those who do not have the ability or are not able to afford to drive, right? Some of you might know that I longboard, and some people think that that's cute, but for me, that's because I've lived my whole life on transit, and to get that last mile, that last kilometer in the Canadian context is so difficult, and longboarding cuts that time down. But I think through that as well, I've really gained an appreciation for how inaccessible the city is for those.
Thank you, Tessica.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Tessica. And sorry to cut you off, and sorry to cut everyone off throughout the course of this, sometimes confusing on my part, panel. Let's give all of the candidates here a round of applause for answering so many tough questions tonight that focus on bringing equity into the city of Vancouver in the next election. There has been a lot of efforts from a lot of people in this room that has brought us to the point that we are at. There have been a lot of milestones that have been made, but still a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think we'll know that we have really achieved the type of equity that we want to see in our city when we can feel it and we can see it in the communities that are represented throughout. So I do want to encourage everyone here to take a look at the Women Transforming Cities Hot Pink Paper campaign report card so that you can see where all of the candidates, not just those who are here tonight, stand on key issues for equity-deserving residents of Vancouver. And for those of us joining us in person, we are going to be concluding by having some snacks in the atrium just outside the door. And we encourage you to stick around and chat with the candidates and hear from them a little bit more, their thoughts on a lot of the issues that we've talked about tonight, and maybe some of the issues that you didn't get to hear from them on tonight. And so you will be able to see where the candidates will be gathered on the slide up ahead based on the topic that they are interested in really focusing and getting into the details on. So I want to say a big thank you again to SFU Public Square, to the YWCA Metro Vancouver City Shift, and the SFU Department of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies for their support to run this event. And of course, all of the volunteers and all of the staff from Women Transforming Cities. Thank you all for making this a really informative night. Thank you again to all the candidates for sharing so much about what it will take to drive towards equity in the city. And to all of you who have shown up in person and online, take care, have a safe evening, and we will see you outside in the atrium. Thank you.